Can I retire? Or can I retire? That's probably the number one question I get, my friends, is when you can retire, or the corollary of that, can you retire? Now, I've done a few videos in the past on this, but I got a lot of new subscribers and I have literally hundreds of videos. So I want to share with you this concept here today because it is so important, and that could get lost in my previous videos I've done. So let's dive right into it. Such a good question to answer because it can really make or break as you are approaching that 60 years old, 65, you're 55, something like that. I'm going to give you some food for thought as you examine your own retirement when it comes to the question that you have: when can you retire, or can you retire? So welcome again to Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel, my friends, the place you come to answer the question of when can you retire, and all kinds of other things when it comes to financial planning as well. So don't forget to subscribe down below. You see my little thing right there, subscribe. I guess that's backwards. I think I got to flip the camera. I forgot to do that. But anyway, so let's dive right into this. And again, this is going to be somewhat of a reiteration of my other video back in April on this. And I'm going to use the same articles. But again, because we've got so many new people here, you've got to understand this. This is probably the most important question I get. A second one, I'm going to address that later today, is what do I do for healthcare? So I'll address that later today. So you probably see me in the same orange shirt. All right. So first and foremost, this is from the Motley Fool. And I talked about the Motley Fool quite a bit because they're a wonderful resource. I've been a member of Dave and Mark Gardner, I can't remember, Gardner's, the brothers there. I've been following Motley Fool for a long, long time. Just a wonderful group of people. Actually, I think that's in the member of the old AOL days when you got the disc going on. I think the Motley Fool was one of the first resources of internet traffic out there off the old AOL days back in the day. It's just kind of funny. But anyway, so they have this article, and I'm just going to read a lot of it verbatim because it's literally that important for you to understand. And then I'm going to go back to the genesis of how all this came to be, because there's one article in particularly that changed the way good financial planning is done. And I always want to address that one article because the guy who wrote it should be held. If there's ever a Nobel Prize for financial planning, this guy should get it. All right. So back in 2016, Chuck Soletta wrote a very popular piece entitled "Forget What the Experts Say, You Can Retire on Less Than $1 million." Chuck should know about these things. His family was able to reach total financial independence about almost 5 years ago. In a recent installment, Chuck focused on spending on virtually every category in your life: transportation, housing, even health insurance. And they all go down as your children move out and the house, out of your house, and you move towards retirement. Wow, who knew? But without any hard numbers to back up the data, it can be difficult to wrap your head around such budgetary changes. So we went back and looked at the numbers provided by BLS. BLS, have we heard that before? Yeah, 1,000 million times on this channel right here, what falls are the average household expenditures for those 65 and older per month. And keep in mind, the average American retires around 62. Housing, $1,294 a month. Obviously, you're going to need a place to live. That's a fact. So you still need a place to live, but average costs are considerably lower when you are in your prime earning years than when you're in your prime earning years. There are two reasons for this. Homes are often paid in full in retirement. I cannot stress this enough, my friends. Pay down your home mortgage. If you can go into retirement with a home mortgage, it changes everything. 180-degree change on your ability to withstand a full retirement, even when the markets go up and down and whatnot. And even if they aren't paid off, couples can downsize as they don't need as much space. The housing also includes your home, obviously, upkeep, utilities, insurance, and furniture. So all that for insurance, utilities, and all that. So we're putting utilities in that category there. Now, that's interesting. That may or may not be applicable to you, depending on where you live, depending on if you use LED lights, for instance, as opposed to incandescent. Don't do that. I got another video on you can save $30 a month easily just by switching out your incandescent light bulbs in front of your garage, in front of your front door with LEDs. Don't waste money on incandescent light bulbs and then leave them on 8 hours a day. That's a waste of money. No other way around that. Furniture. Now, property tax is going to be part of this too. And property taxes can vary from the county you live in. I live in Fulton County, Georgia. If I lived in 2 miles over to the west in Cherokee County, Georgia, my property taxes would be half for the same house. So you got to keep that in mind too. And then you got your homestead exemptions as another point of context. And for retirees, sometimes they have higher exemptions the non-retiree working stiff. So you got to keep that in mind too. And your homestead exemption varies by state and even by county, even by town. So you just got to consider that as well. But I think this is a good starting point to say about $1,300 a month in housing. I think that's 100% correct. Transportation is, I agree with this. This is why I quit my job. It's hard to believe how much your commute actually costs. Now, for me, not only did it cost in upkeep of my vehicle, timing belts, whatnot, oil changes, obviously gas, it just costs my mental health as well. And you can't quantify that other than it was miserable to me. And now I'm not miserable. So that has a value there for sure. What these guys are saying is that you're spend about $600 a month on transportation. Using the BLS definition, this also includes car insurance, maintenance, and even airfare for the occasional trip. So I like that. They're using insurance too, and that's pretty good. Healthcare is a big one for sure. I mean, healthcare is always going to be secondary to housing, and if you follow the BLS, you'll see that. Everyone thinks this healthcare is the biggest expense. Not even close. Not even close. Housing, without question, is the biggest expense retirees have. And if you get me sick of me saying that, I'm going to say it until I'm blue in the face, because if this is the one episode you follow, you've got to understand healthcare is not the bogey, it is housing. And so when you factor in your Part B, Part D, and you factor in Medigap, i.e. Medicare supplement, or your Part D premiums, Part C premiums, they're factoring about $500 a month in healthcare. And I agree with that. It's roughly $250 to $300 per beneficiary. So I think that's about right. Food, roughly $500 a month. I think that's spot on. And like I said in my other video, for me, it's probably going to be a little bit more because I love to eat me some grass-fed beef. And man, that's not cheap, but it is worth every penny. And some open-range chicken. Now, I do some gardening, so I can self-sufficient to some degree with my own fruits. And well, not fruits yet, but once the mulberries and blueberries and apples kick in, I'll be able to save a lot of money there. Grow your own food. You can save money, and you don't pay tax on it. Some states and counties do have a sales tax on food. You don't pay sales tax if you grow your own. And by the way, what are you doing growing your own? You're eating fresh. And it gets you outside, get that vitamin D from the sun. And entertainment, $200 a month. So personal insurance pensions. And this is for personal life insurance. They're looking at $225 a month or so. That may or may not you. Cash contributions, maybe you do some tithing. I don't know, maybe you give to the local newspaper, charity, whatever you're doing. It could be $200 a month, and then $300 a month other. So that covers everything from books to alcohol to personal apparel. $3,000, $4,000 a year for that. That's fine. So what does all this mean? For the average retiree, and this is BLS numbers, my friends, Bureau of Labor Statistics. This isn't just some guy saying this is what we did anecdotally, that we have empirical evidence of this. And empirical means what can be observed and seen. Anecdotal evidence is just a one-off. And this is not anecdotal. This is empirical. We have seen this. We can study it and analyze it. So basically, they need $44,000 a year in retirement, which is $3,700 a month. And using the 4% rule, that means a nest egg of over $1 million would be needed to finance a retirement. But that is silly because we got to look at Social Security. And once Social Security are factored, I'm not even looking at pensions. We're not even going to look at pensions, just looking at Social Security. As of April 2017, the average retired worker received $1,366 a month in benefits, well, the average spouse of a retired worker who didn't work, him or herself, received $711, which means of that $44,600, they're getting $25,000 from Social Security. That lowers the amount down to roughly $20,000 a year of what you need. And that 4% is less. You need about $500,000. Now, hold on. You got to keep watching. All right, because this is where we're using the 4% rule, and that's a problem for me. And I'm going to share it with you in just a second. So let's just keep going down. Well, that's certainly not chump change. It helps solidify the numbers from Chuck that he says in terms of how much you need to retire comfortably. I actually even take issue with that. So let me close out of this article here. Actually, I don't know if I can close out. Would it close you guys? And I'm going to show you what was the most article, and I've talked about this guy a million times a Sunday, Ty Bernicki, in the Financial Planning Journal for Financial Planning in 2005. I don't see a date on here, but I think it's October 2005. Let me just go down and see if I can see a date. June of 2005. Okay, so Journal for Financial Planning, June of 2005. And what Ty says, and back then, it was very, very counterintuitive. And this is going to go back to my challenge of the 4% rule. Back then, we did believe in the 4% rule. A guy named Bill Bengen, 94, I think, ran the numbers on what you needed to safe withdrawal rates, SWR, your safe withdrawal rates. If you had $100,000, you could take $4,000 out safely, and it would have lasted for 30 years in retirement, given all the vagaries of the markets up and down. And he used a 60 to 40% stock to bond allocation, and he kept it at 60 to 40%. But he only used large cap U.S. stocks and government bonds. That's it. So it wasn't very diverse. And he didn't change it based on your risk tolerance. He didn't change it based on bonds. You subtract your age by 100, and that's the number of bonds. He just said 60-40, large cap stocks, government bonds, and never changes. And and for you to survive, that money to survive the up and down of the market, you could take $4,000 a year from that, adjusted each year with inflation. All right, so adjust each year with inflation. So $4,000 the first year, $4,000 times 3% inflation would be what, $4,120 the second year, and so on and so on. And that's where the genesis is actually the 4.4% rule came, where you could take 4% a year each and every year, adjusted for inflation, given 60 to 40 stock to bond portfolio. So that was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And again, if they do a Nobel Prize in financial planning, Bill Bengen should get that too, for bringing the difference between the Dave Ramsey model, which bothers me, as you can tell. Oh, I get 10% a year in the market, so I should be able to get 7% without touching principal. It's silly, man. It's silly. No, because if you do 7% a year, you're going to sell when the markets are down, and you are going to doom yourself. And that is what the Bill Bengen rule, the 4% rule, said. You can do 4% in theory without running out of money based on past history, again, empirical evidence. But using that evidence doesn't presume to say that's going to be the way it will be in the future, because we don't know what the future will be. But that's all we can do. We can say at the end of the day, if you did this, you would have been safe. If you followed Dave Ramsey, you would have been destitute. That's just a fact. So we know for a fact, at least in the past, if Dave Ramsey is wrong, Bill Bengen was right. Thus, the 4% rule, 4.4, came into existence. I know that might be a little bit too much for you, but that's how we got the 4% rule. Now, the problem with the 4% rule is it assumes each year you're going to spend adjusted for inflation. So I'm going to take 4% this year, 4,120 the following year, because of 3% inflation. 3% on 4,120 would be, 4,300, whatever it is. Each and every year, my spending will increase at a level for inflation. And only 11 years later, in 2005, comes old Ty Bernicki. Traditional retirement planning assumes that a household's expenditures will increase a certain amount each year throughout retirement. Yet, going back to the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the Consumer Expenditure Survey, so BLS does the Consumer Expenditure Survey, CES, show that household expenditures actually decline as retirees age. Consequently, under traditional retirement planning, consumers tend to oversave for retirement, underspend in their early years, or postpone retirement. Let that sink in. Consumers, because they're basing their numbers on adjusted each year expenditures, inflating each year, consumers will tend to oversave for retirement, underspend in their early years, or even to postpone retirement. Now, why do you think Ty Bernicki, we don't see his name on CNBC and the Wall Street Journal and all the various mutual fund companies that are out there? And want to take a guess, me? Because they've been telling us we don't save enough. They've been telling us to part more and more and more of our assets with Fidelities, with the T. Rowe Prices and all these guys. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying at the end of the day, is there a perverse incentive for investment managers to get you to save more? I think so. And here comes Ty saying, whoa. If you look at the actual numbers, we start crunching them, maybe we're overestimating how much people need to save or how much they need to have. Interesting. Reality retirement planning assumes that a household's real spending will decrease incrementally throughout retirement. The results is that clients can make more realistic retirement savings assumptions that will be able to retire sooner. Now, this is what's important. Using Monte Carlo simulation, the paper runs hypothetical retirement income projections comparing traditional retirement planning, i.e., my 4% rule. I'm going to spend 4% this year, 4% times inflation the next, 4% times inflation again the next, and then reality retirement planning. Under the traditional approach, the couple's nest egg would appear to be depleted by 80. Under the reality approach, the nest egg at age 80 would be over 2 million bones, my friends. That is a significant divergence. One is destitute at 80. The other has 7 figures of cash on the table. Interesting. So let's say Ty's off by 50%, which is, I would even argue that won't be the case. But let's just say it is. Say, well, Ty, that's crazy. You're off by 50%. That's a pretty big swing and miss. You still got $1 million when you're 80 years old compared to the other guys who say you have nothing. Interesting, huh? Such dramatic differences not only have implications for retirement planning for such related issues as tax, investment, and estate planning as well. So I want to show you this. Look at this. Here's the Consumer Expenditure Survey from 2002. Again, this article goes back to 2005. It hasn't changed. I've done tons of videos on this exact same stuff, the BLS, the Health Retirement Studies, HRS, using the Consumer Expenditure Survey, CES. There's other researchers now have come down the pike. Wade Pfau, David Blanchett, Michael Kitces, all the green eye shade guys in the industry. They're not all going to say the exact numbers, but it is becoming now established. I hate to say it's a fact because there is no fact on what you will do in the future, but it's established in financial planning vernacular that most retirees are going to spend less as they age and not increase their expenditures with inflation each and every year. And so the whole premise of that is this is no longer crazy man talk. Like, remember the guy, who was the guy? I'm drawing a blank. Who challenged the Ansel Keys. I got the book right behind me too. I can't remember. I cannot believe can't remember that guy who challenged the Ansel Keys 7-country study that said we need high carbs and low fat. And he wrote the book, More Fat, Less Carb. He wrote the book, How We Get Fat or Why We Get Fat. I can't believe it. Just probably the best book you'll read. Anyway, when he, and of course, what's his name, who did I can't believe these guys' names. When they did the studies on the Atkins diet, Dr. Atkins, when these guys came out with their studies and research and said, wait a second, Ansel Keys studies are wrong. They had arrows thrown at them. We had a guy named Ignaz Semmelweis who told doctors in the delivery room in the UK, I think it was, and maybe Switzerland, I can't remember. But back in the mid 1800s, he says, hey, when you're delivering babies, wash your hands. And they said, all the powers that be said, we're not washing our hands. Who are you to tell us to wash our hands? He goes, because when you take a baby out of an infected woman who's delivering and you haven't washed your hands, now you go deliver that other baby with the infection on your hands, you're infecting that woman too. There's an insane amount of women dying in delivery because of infection they're passing on from one to the other. So Semmelweis said, don't do that anymore. Wash your hands. And all these guys said, you're crazy. Don't tell us what to do. And they actually had them locked up. All right. So we got lots of issues where the powers that be have a very significant reason to defend their turf. And what they will do a lot of times is mock those who challenge them. So Ty Bernanke comes out. And of course, we don't hear of him other than me trying to remember his name, keep it out there because it's such an important piece of literature, or I guess research. And then now we're starting to see the worm turning, which is where the more of the research is starting to show that Bernanke was actually correct and that you can be less worrisome about your retirement. So here's Bernanke saying, again, from CES of 2002, age, if you're 45 to 54, here's your expenditures. As you get to 55 to 64, as you get to 65 to 74, and as you get 75 plus, and you'll see what you're spending 48,000 on, and at 45 to 54 was 44,000 from a 55, and you can see so your expenditures go down dramatically. Your healthcare goes up, and that's a fact. Your housing drops dramatically, without question. And one of the reasons is, of course, is that, let's see, the housing, hopefully have your housing paid off for sure. And there's all kinds of things going on. You're not contributing to 401k. You no longer have FICA taxes. So think about this. If you have to pay FICA, that's 7.65% right out of the gate on taxes. On top of the income taxes you have to pay. All right. And on top of, if you're putting any money away in your 401k, I mean, all that's going someplace. Your FICA tax, your income tax, your 401k, the cost of commute, all that stuff is gone now. And if you're self-employed, that FICA tax drops. You got to pay on both sides of that. So it's 15.3 or something like that. I can't remember. 7.65 times 2. You're saving 15% right there on FICA alone. Never mind your income tax. All right. So the whole point about Bernanke's is that, look, your expenditures drops significantly as you age, even though your healthcare does go up. In fact, your healthcare goes up $1,300 or so. That's a 50% increase. Well, okay. But look at this. Your housing drops by 15 to, I mean, that's a 50% decrease in housing right there alone. And I mean, so as you can see, a 50% increase from a smaller amount versus a 50% decrease from a larger amount is not the same. They're not equatable. So 50% off 2,500 versus increase by 50% off of 15,000 is completely different numbers. All right, so let's keep going on to this. And then he breaks it down to age groups here as well, 5-year. All right, so what does that mean? So now we know we're not likely going to need to spend 4% a year for inflation each year. We're just not going to. So we're going to go back to this guy and say, we're going to say we need $50,000 of income coming in, $50,000 bucks. I'm going to show you the Social Security thing here. And this is how Social Security calculates your benefits. What they do is they take your top 35 years of earnings, of nominal earnings. So you look at your Social Security statement and you say, hey, here's my top 35 years, bum, 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 bum. And they inflate them or index them for an indexing factor. So if you made $9,870 in 1978, you're going to times that by 4.6, and that's going to get your indexed earnings of $45,481. And this is a wonderful chart here. So you got two different things. This is the max on this side, and this is someone who's only making 45,000 or so adjusted. So here is someone making roughly 40,000 a year adjusted for inflation. All right. And here's someone making the max. So as you can see, you go down here and they take your highest. So they add up all these numbers right here, your indexed earnings, they add them all up. And they give you that right there, 1705, and they divide that by 420, which gives you your average index monthly earnings of 4,059. All right, and that is basically someone who averages roughly 45,000 a year or so. And it looks like about 48,000. Now here's a person who made the max. So this lady made the max each and every year, and they add up all that. Again, they index them, and that gives her 3.84 million. Divide that by 420, and that's the maximum you can get from Social Security in terms of your average index monthly earnings. But whoa. That's not how much you're going to get. That is your AIME. Now we got to figure out what our PIA is. So what we do is we go to Josh's trusty calculator here. And we say simply, once it brings up, I'm going to drink a sip of my coffee. Once we bring this up, loading. I probably have too many things up here, but I'm excited to talk with you about this because it's so important. I'm going to hit pause for just a second. Here we go. Okay, still loading. Wow. Okay. All right, let me hit pause while we're waiting for it to load.